Welcome, everyone, to our webinar on founder recruitment models for academic spinouts. I'm Kirsten Loita of Osage University Partners, where I lead university relations efforts. We're talking about a little bit more about that in just a bit. And I'm really pleased today to be joined by two leaders of these programs, Amy Dodenhoff and Dave Repp. We're going to go to the next slide. I'm going to have them each briefly introduce themselves right now, and then we'll delve more into the subject matter in just a bit. Amy, could you go first?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I was going to say good morning, but realized not everyone is in my same time zone here. So thank you all so much for being here. My name is Amy Dodenhoff. I'm Director of Venture Development at Venture Partners at CU Boulder, and I co-lead the Embark Deep Tech Startup Creator with one of my colleagues, and that's what we're going to talk about.
Great. Thanks, Amy. Dave?
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm Dave Repp. I'm Director of Ventures at the University of Michigan Innovation Partnerships. I also manage a seed fund at Innovation Partnerships called the Accelerate Blue Fund, as well as leading the Accelerate Blue Foundry here at the university.
Great. So glad that both of you are here today to talk with us about your experiences firsthand with these programs. I know everyone's excited to learn about what it is that you're doing. We'll go to the next slide. But before we dive into that discussion, a few logistics. We will be recording this webinar. We are recording this webinar, and it's going to be available to all of OUP's partners via the partner portal. And we'll also have a recording of this up on our YouTube channel. The partner portal that I mentioned is an online portal for the tech transfer officers and researchers at our partner universities, and it's full of relevant tech transfer and startup information. So you just have to sign up for that if you are at one of our partner institutions to get access to that. You can find both of these resources, our YouTube channel and the partner portal, via the QR codes that are on this particular slide. We do encourage questions throughout this webinar. Please use the Q&A tool in the Zoom toolbar down at the bottom, usually, of your Zoom tool, and submit your questions in there. I will be reviewing those and asking them of our panelists as we go along. We're going to have them each do their presentations first, and then we'll be jumping in with questions to them after that. We do have some other upcoming webinars. We have our yearly Your OUP partnership webinar, which is chock full of information about OUP and how we work with our partner institutions. So if you are new to an institution, or if you want to review how your OUP partnership works, come on to this webinar that's on December 3rd. We'll be sending out information about that to our partner institutions soon. And then we think in around mid-December, we're working on a webinar right now with some other folks on effective models and patent budgets at academic institutions. So more information about that webinar coming soon. We'll go to the next slide. A short introduction on OUP for those of you who do not know us. We're a venture capital fund that partners with academic institutions to invest in their startups, typically by exercising the participation rights available through their licenses. For those of you who don't know, participation rights are the ability to invest in a future round of a company on the same terms and conditions as other investors. We do have recommended language for participation rights if you don't currently have this in your license agreements, and just feel free to reach out to us and I can send that over to you. So as a part of this partnership with our academic institutions, they potentially share in a portion of our profits and also receive programmatic support on tech transfer and academic startups. We're now on our fourth fund here at OUP, and we've made investments in over 150 different companies, all in areas of deep science, with many of those companies achieving successful exits, either through IPO or merger and acquisition. So we'll go to the next slide just to give people an overview of the types of startups that we've invested in the past. We're always happy to talk about our model and our portfolio, so feel free to reach out to me or anyone on our team that you know if you have any questions on that. So with that, we'll go to the next slide, and we're going to have each of our panelists describe the programs at their institutions, and then we'll go into the Q&A time that I mentioned. So Amy, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to you to describe Embark.
Excellent. All right, I already did my intro. So Amy Dodenhoff, Director of Venture Development at Venture Partners at CU Boulder. We developed the Embark program. Our first cohort was in 2023. And as far as we are aware, it was kind of a first of its kind program. So I'll jump into details here. Can we jump to the next slide? So wanted to kick this off by noting that CU Boulder in fiscal year 24 had the most startup companies This is according to Autumn data. This was the second most startups by a US university ever, and 9 of these came through that first cohort of Embark. One snuck in their option right before the change of the fiscal year, but we had 10 companies in that first cohort. And of course, I'll point out that my colleague here, Dave, in University of Michigan, was right behind us in second place that year. So let's jump to the next slide. Great. So with Embark, our goal is to match entrepreneurs with innovations developed at CU Boulder to form new startup companies. So that's our thesis, and that's what we're doing here. Next slide. So backing up a little bit, for those who may not be aware, Boulder, we sit right at the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. So we like to think of everything in terms of climbing mountains. Many of us are very passionate about that. So when we describe the pathway to commercialization with venture partners, we talk about climbing typically, traditionally, 2 mountains. One, to partnering with an existing company through industry licensing, and the other through startups. And we have various resources that help guide teams and researchers through both of these pathways. Next slide. And we see Embark as really bridging the gap here between company partnership and a traditional tech transfer startup, because in this case, the inventors aren't necessarily leading the startup efforts, which is what happens most of the time for us. Next slide, please. So the first thing that we had to do is convince the university. So the CU, why do we do this? Venture Partners really likes Embark because it helps us create real world impact from CU technologies. Oftentimes these are technologies that otherwise don't have a team that wants to lead the startup efforts, and maybe there's not a direct pathway to commercializing those technologies with industry, or they need some of that initial de-risking before industry would be interested. So it's commercializing technologies that otherwise we're sitting on the shelf, so to speak. It forms startup companies as a big part of the metrics that all of us track. And these startup companies, being led by a professional startup founder, often move quickly through accelerators and towards investment and non-dilutive funding. We've seen them move a lot faster than a lot of our teams that are led by the technology teams in the labs. It also gives our team data on the technologies that are not chosen. So we ask the Embark participants to give us feedback on the technologies that weren't selected, that they took a look at. And that informs our ability to make informed patent decisions and where we're going to spend our patent budget. Very relevant webinar coming up in just a few weeks. It also gives us really good data on the technologies that are chosen, because not every startup is successful pretty much across the board for all of us. And these are similar to that, although we do have a higher success rate generally with these teams so far. So there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, and I'll touch on that, but all of these results make it really worth it for our team to invest our time, energy, and effort into this program. Next slide, please. So we also had to convince the university to do this and get funding for it. So the initial funding for Embark, which for our kind of like trial run, the first time we ran it, we actually got a grant from the state of Colorado. It was an economic development grant to stimulate new job creation post-pandemic. And so that really funded most of that initial cohort to give us kind of the proof of concept and prove things out. It also got us the impact stats that we needed to make the case and ultimately convince our leadership to continue funding this program. So currently the funds come from the university that run this program. And we also have some funding that we pull from our licensing revenues to help us run the program. So it allows us to reinvest in commercialization. Next slide, please. All right, the PI why. So we have to convince the research teams to put their technologies into a program like this and trust us with their life's work, essentially. So we think of ourselves as a inventor first and founder first office. So we see ourselves as kind of like a service organization. How do we best serve our researchers and how do we best serve our founders, and making sure that we're plugging in the right ways. So to start with, we did some customer discovery. A lot of us preach customer discovery. We wanted to do that ourselves. So when we talk to researchers about what they want to have happen with their inventions, the term that they kept coming back to over and over and over again was making real world impact. So this is a chance for them to have their technologies make real world impact without necessarily having to lead the startup efforts on their own, assuming that's the route that they choose to go. We also let the researchers choose how much they want to participate in the startup. So we give them options going into the program where they can self-select into whether they would be more interested in having like no involvement, being a startup advisor, all the way to, I want to be a co-founder. I just don't want to lead the effort on my own in those early stages. Another key, and this is again, understanding customers, researchers, PIs need to fund their labs. That is such a key part of their jobs. So by working with a startup company, especially in those early stages, really can unlock translational grant funding opportunities that also include components that help fund the lab. So there are certain even research grants where if you can show the real pathway to commercialization, those opportunities open up. And then of course, there's things like STTR funding that include a significant lab component. Our CUIP policy also dictates that a portion of revenues go to the lab that led the invention, as well as to the inventors personally. So that's always a nice value add for them. And also they can get equity in the startup company. So that's obviously dependent on what their participation level is in the company. If they're taking more of an advisor role, it's obviously gonna be much less than if they're a full co-founder and really, rolling up their sleeves. We send both our researchers and our startup founders the OUP resources that talk about the equity split and the pie charts. So really grateful to have those as always. Next slide, please. So next we'll talk about the entrepreneur why and how do we convince CEO candidates and startup founder candidates that this is the right opportunity. So there are multi-time startup founders or even first-time startup founders who are looking to be entrepreneurs or looking for their next gig, but they don't necessarily have the idea of what they want to work on next. So this is kind of our main market. And these are technologies that already have a lot of money invested in that R&D. So they often have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars invested in the technology that they then get to take and do the next steps. We also pour our resources into these companies, just like we do with all of our startups, so they get access to those. Venture Partners offers startup-friendly licensing terms. We have a program called Licensing with Ease. You can pull it up on our website. We have, for deep tech companies, the founders can self-select into any of 3 different models that they are eligible for. And these have been vetted by VCs like OUP to say that they are startup-friendly and investable terms. And we also provide the startup founders with financial support. Next slide. So the entrepreneurs that participate in Embark, first and foremost, get exclusive IP access. So Venture Partners does a free 1-year option agreement for all startup companies, including our Embark cohort. We also work really hard to create a cohort feeling amongst the founders that take part in Embark. So a lot of startup founders that we have talked to really say that there are things that no one understands, right? There are things they can't bring home and talk to their spouse or their parents or their personal network they want to have, have conversations with other people who are going through these very hard early stage startup steps. So we work with them to make sure that they're getting that cohort feeling. We do individual mentorship meetings with the teams every other week, where they get to meet with folks from our team as well as an experienced entrepreneur who can provide their expertise. We give them access to programs and funding to help them build their startup company, and they get access to the Embark Accelerator, which is content that is just for them. Next slide, please. We also offer various prizes and incentives. So the main prize is the IP, that exclusive access. For top teams, they get part-time salary stipends. So we actually start Embark with a job application. They submit like a resume, a cover letter, and a short video. And that's what we assess to determine if they enter the interview process. I'll talk about that in a bit, but going through that HR process allows us to use some of those funds to fund a salary stipend part-time for 6 months. So, so this year that will run from like January to June of next year, just as an example. We also provide product development grants into CU Labs. We don't have enough of those to give every startup founder those. Historically, those product development grants have been given to folks who won the part-time salary stipends. If they asked for it and made the case for it, we then selected the top teams to get those. For this current cohort, which we're running right now, we're thinking about separating those out to create additional prizes. So not everyone needs a salary or has the funds to work on a startup without that salary. So we're working to understand who's in the cohort and what their preference would be on that front. We're working with some nationally recognized accelerators to help our Embark startups get into those. And this year, we also set aside, taking a little bit of a page out of Dave's book here, a certain amount of pre-seed investments. Venture Partners is starting to make up to 10 pre-seed investments every year. We have reserved some money to get for this cohort to dangle that prize at the end as well. And so the Embark cohort will have a chance to pitch for those pre-seed investments, and they'll have access to some of our local angel groups as well. Next slide, please. So we're going to step into some of the more nuanced details of Embark. So Embark starts with a lot of pre-program work. I want to emphasize that it's a lot of work on our team to get this program up and running and to run the program itself. So before the program, the first thing we need to do is recruit the technologies. So our team combs through our portfolio, chooses the technologies that we think are the top technologies that are fit for a startup. So we're looking for like a substantial step change or something along those lines. And we have to get the inventors on board, like I talked about earlier. Then our team collects information. So we work on tech blurbs, which are like 1 to 2 sentences about the technologies. A lot of the blurbs for this current cohort are still on the Embark website. So if you pull that up, you can see the examples of those. And then on the back end, once folks get into the program, they get access to additional information. So we collect the papers and the patent documents and schedule the calls with the PIs ahead of time. All of you work with PIs, you understand how busy they are. It's important to get on their calendars ahead of time and make sure they're setting aside time to work with the Embark founders. And then we recruit the founders. So we get the word out to really attract the top talent here. Next slide, please. So some pre-program goals kind of through all of that. We select about 50 technologies that we think are good for startups, get the inventors on board, and gather that detailed information. We recruit the startup founders. So the teasers that are on the Embark website, those blurbs, are part of our recruitment tools. So we want folks to understand what the technologies are that they might have access to or that they will have access to. So we don't have every technology that's in the program that's on there for various reasons, including maybe there are some where we heard from a PI late that they are interested and want to put it in there. But giving folks a preview we found is really an effective tool. This year, we also did what we call influencer recruitment. So our team put together a list of folks that we thought that had influence over entrepreneurs or had networks that we wanted to have access to, and we reached out to them with our promo kit. So our promo kit included sample language if they knew somebody, if they said, oh, Sarah would be great for this program. There was sample email text for them to reach out to that person. There was sample LinkedIn posts. There were things like that where folks could pull from. We wanted to make it as easy as possible, but really expand upon, our networks with our networks. And of course, we used LinkedIn. We posted on our personal LinkedIn, the Venture Partners LinkedIn page. And with that job posting, we were able to use the CUHR resources as well. So all this led to, for the first two cohorts, we had about 110 to 120 applicants in each cohort. And this current cohort that we're running right now, we had 160 applicants. And I would say it was a significant step change in terms of the level of folks that are applying. These are a lot of multi-time founders or VCs who are looking to switch onto the entrepreneurial side of things. Zero insult to folks in our first two cohorts. Those two cohorts are incredible. But it's something that we noticed just in that resume cover letter review process. Next slide, please. So folks that get selected through that process get into the interview. So we used to call it the Embark competition. We switched it to the interview to make it a little more analogous to the traditional hiring process, so that folks knew that once they got through that resume cover letter and short pitch that we used to review the applicants, that this was then the interview process that they would go through. So the first part of that is matchmaking. So that's when the Embark applicants have a chance to review the technologies and meet with the inventor teams. Then they go into startup ideation phase where they do customer discovery. We make our iCore resources available to them through our office and through our hub. And then we'll do a special half-day session for them if they don't have the time to do the full cohort. And then we work with them on pitch prep. And ultimately, the teams develop a pitch. That's how we do the final cohort selection and determine the prizes. Next slide, please. Diving into a little more detail on the interview process schedule, since I know if you're anything like me, you're looking at these webinars, having slides like this, I find it to be so helpful. So I know it's a lot of white space, not my usual MO here, but first up, the Embark applicants get a chance to review the technology details. We do initial group meetings with the inventors, follow-up group meetings with the inventors. So if there's still a group of folks that are interested in that technology, we'll do follow-up group meetings. Once folks get down to they've selected their top 1 to 2 technologies, that's when they start transitioning to these individual calls. That's when our team takes a step back. So we always have somebody from our team on those initial group meetings. Then on those individual calls where it's an Embark applicant talking directly with the PI, we take a step back and let them develop that personal relationship. Then the Embark applicant.
Can I just ask you a quick question right here?
Yeah.
So by group meetings, you mean multiple interviewees or?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So those group meetings, it's multiple Embark applicants meeting with the PI or whoever the designated researcher is that's going to take the call for that technology. And the idea there is we often have 5 to 10 Embark candidates looking at each technology. And so those group calls help triage on behalf of the Embark PIs, how many calls and things that we're putting on their calendar. So we often ask the inventors to set aside 2 one-hour calls for those group sessions. So they have that initial group and the follow-up. And then once it gets to the point where they have maybe like 1 or 2 folks who are actively interested, they become individual calls. To let them develop that relationship, start talking about like how much involvement they're each going to have and what that's actually going to look like. Then they talked about before, they'll do their customer discovery, potentially participate in I-Core. We work with them on pitch practice. Then they submit a semifinal pitch video. And then those who are selected as the top candidates out of the semifinals are invited to the final pitch day. We do that live and in person, although we have had applicants who are not local throughout all 3 cohorts. And we have not made them fly into town to participate. So they can do Zoom, but we do note for people who are local, we would like to have them come in person. Next slide, please. We also put on some programs throughout the interview process for the full cohort of applicants. So we do a kickoff session where it's an overview of the program, certainly a non-traditional hiring process, as I mentioned. So we walk them through kind of everything that they're going to go through and we'll set the expectations. We then do a session on venture partners resources, where we talk about all the programs and things that we have both at CU as well as access to in our community. We do a session with one of our CEOs. We call it Meet the CEO. We had a few questions in the first cohort where they're like the PI, the Embark applicants were saying the PI didn't want to be involved, and what would that possibly look like, and how could they ever do a startup without their involvement as a full co-founder. So we brought in one of our CEOs who had done that before. His PIs hadn't been co-founders, but they were just advisors for the first year until they raised investment, and then they took a very big step back. And so he comes in and he has a very open and honest conversation with the Embark candidates at that point. We'll do another session on preparing for the final pitch where we talk them through the scoring rubric and what the expectations are of them through the semifinals and the finals. And we just added a session on non-dilutive funding that we'll do for this current cohort because we're getting a lot of questions from the applicants about non-dilutive funding strategies. So I mentioned before, we have several multi-time founders and VCs who are looking at switching to the startup side of things. So a lot of them have either like bootstrapped or are very familiar with dilutive funding, but less so on how do they take advantage of the non-dilutive funding, what's out there, how do they strategize and work through that. So we're going to do one of those sessions coming up in a couple weeks. Next slide. So then we have the accelerator. So once the teams get through that final pitch, we select who will be hired, who gets the R&D grants, and what the other resources are that we can plug folks into. The Embark cohort gets access to this kind of exclusive accelerator program that we do. So we provide support. So that's through not just the Embark accelerator, but other accelerators that we host or that we can help network them into. We have cohort meetings, which I will touch on in a minute, and then that mentorship support that I touched on earlier. Meanwhile, the Embark cohort is working towards forming companies, figuring out the details of the cap table, and signing their option. So we require they sign their option within that first 6 months. Which helps us get the startup metrics, but also, make sure that the IP can be formally put on hold, and we're working towards they're working towards the company, and we're working towards the license agreement on all fronts. And then ultimately we host a pitch event for them, work with them on partnering with investors and kind of some of those early stage things, and hope that they make as much progress as they possibly can. Next slide. So the accelerator programming that I mentioned, some of these are very standard accelerator type sessions. I'll flag one of them in particular, and that's the first one that I put here is like, what is a PI and why are they so busy? This was a session, actually all of this programming we added for our second cohort. The first cohort, we didn't do any formal programming for the Embark teams, and we felt like we could do better as we were talking to folks. This is something that we built for the last cohort. I anticipate we'll further tweak it in this third cohort. But in talking to the first cohort, one of the things that several of them mentioned is it took them the full 6 months to figure out why the PIs were hard to get in touch with and what they were doing all day and what all of the things are that they're working on. And we thought to ourselves, we know a lot of PIs and we can help solve for that. So we brought in a PI. I think there were a couple of keys. One is it was not someone who had a technology that had been picked up through that cohort. Because we wanted the PI to feel like they could be very open and honest with the folks in the Embark cohort. And we wanted the Embark cohort to feel very comfortable asking kind of some of those detailed questions that they might thought of. They didn't want to be thought of as, a silly question or something like that. So we brought in a PI who already has a startup, so he could speak to both sides of it. And he talked about all of the things that a PI does in a day, how they approach grants, their service requirements, what promotion and tenure look like, all of those things. And then we had all of these other sessions as well, which you can take a look at. So I will wrap there. You can jump to the next slide. I think that's just great.
You know what, Amy, I'm going to ask you just a few questions that are going to be quick ones, just because they're very
Sure.
specific to the program. So first of all, how long does the whole interview process take with candidates?
Yeah, so we had our kickoff this year on October 2nd, and the final pitch day will be December 11th. So it's a little over 2 months from the time that they find out that they get into the applicant pool for the interview process through the time that they pitch.
Okay.
I would say the longer time you can do there, the better. We were working with some time constraints for the type of funding that we got for the program this year that kind of forced our hand a little bit. But I think longer process will be a little bit better. I know Michigan does things a little bit more stretched out, which I think is great.
All right, next question is, does the 1-year free option include ongoing patent expenses?
So no, not for our startup option. It often does if we're working with industry or someone who has raised capital. But we do startup expenses. Past patent costs are due at the time that a license is signed, but we can put a payment plan or something like that in place under the license if we need to, depending on what the startup circumstances are.
Okay, 2 more, and then we'll move on to Dave. We've got a ton of questions here. I'm just trying to get through a couple that are very specific. How much money are the product development grants typically?
So the first cohort, we had 200K for those, and we split it into 2 grants, each of 100K. We got feedback from that cohort that more of them could have used those funds. So the second cohort, we did 4 50K grants. With the amount of funding that we have for this year, which is a little bit less than we've had in the past, I'm sure a lot of us are going through some funding challenges. We're going to do 2 50K grants this year.
Okay, great. Last question before we move on to Dave. Got so many more that we're going to answer after Dave gets through his amazing slides. For the I-Corps program, do the inventors also participate in customer discovery interviews, or is it just the applicants themselves?
That's a great question. I think it depends team by team what they do. So if there's an inventor who wants to be a co-founder type, level of involvement, then sometimes they do also participate in I-Corps and in that customer discovery, especially early on as the Embark is trying to wrap their head around the technology at the same time that they're doing this early customer discovery. But certainly there are plenty that where it's just a CEO candidate that's doing that. And then of course we hope they would take those findings back to the researcher in terms of what that looks like for steering, additional R&D or things like that. Or if they do customer discovery on something and decide that there is maybe not an opportunity or the opportunity wasn't what they were expecting, we would hope that they would bring that feedback to our team so that we can understand what that technology needs. This goes back to the earlier conversation we were having about getting that feedback on the technologies being such a critical piece of the program for us.
Great. Thank you so much, Amy. We'll get to more questions from the audience in just a bit, but let's move on to Dave to hear about their Accelerate Blue Foundry program.
Thanks, Kirsten. And first of all, I just want to say, kudos to Colorado for building such an amazing program and blazing a trail for all of us. And thank you especially to Amy and Bryn for being so generous with your time and sharing best practices with us. I love the what is a PI and why are they so busy session. May have to steal another thing from you guys. But for today, I think Amy did a wonderful job of really going through Colorado's program, and there's so many similarities between their program and the University of Michigan's. I'm not going to go through ours in as much detail, but I wanted to focus a little bit more on, how we adapted what Colorado has done to fit in with our own programs here at the University of Michigan. And then since we've run one cohort, last fall, through the spring, we ran our first pilot cohort. I wanted to also talk a little bit about what we learned, what we've changed since then, and maybe give all of you some recommendations for starting your own program. So with that, next slide. So, I think we're all really trying to solve for the same problem here, which really is the founder talent gap. And I won't spend much time on this slide, except to say, in the third bullet here under the founder problem, I get people coming to me all the time, probably several times a week, looking for jobs, startup jobs. That is not the problem we're trying to solve for. Really, what we're trying to solve for are founders, finding people who don't just want to be CEOs and don't want to get paid, but people who are really willing to roll up their sleeves and build a startup from the ground up. Those are much harder to find, as you all know. So, some of the things that we had previously attempted in our office, we at one point had a person who was the talent and engagement manager, who was an individual whose sole focus really was to try to make these matches. That's difficult for one person to do because one person's Rolodex is only so large. So we didn't keep that role on in our office. We also tried to have a job board where we were bringing in entrepreneurs, and we had a place to keep their resumes, hoping that we'd develop a bench over time. But there really wasn't an impetus for people to send their resumes. So next slide, please. So when I learned about what CU had done and the success of the Embark program, I really wanted to figure out how we could build something into our own ecosystem, our own set of programs that made sense without having to go to leadership and pitch something for funding, and really having to convince our leadership to allow us to do something. So I wanted to figure out how we could build something, in using a lean model with the resources we have. And kind of looking at what the University of Michigan does have, we have a very strong mentors in residence program. We have about a dozen mentors in residence that are subsidized by the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. So our statewide economic development agency. We have a couple great translational grant programs that we run here on campus that are statewide programs. They're called MTRAC for Life Sciences and MTRAC for Transportation. So we're funding a lot of technology de-risking through these programs. And then we have those stakeholder engagement programs, whether you want to call them customer discovery or broaden it out to more stakeholder engagement, because we're talking about things like regulatory and reimbursement through these programs like Fast Forward Medical Innovation or our I-Core hub here. And then finally, at the very bottom of the slide, we actually, in our tech transfer office in innovation partnerships, have a couple of seed funds. As I mentioned at the beginning, I run a seed fund called the Accelerate Blue Fund that invests only in University of Michigan spinouts. And we also run another pre-seed fund that is called the Michigan University Innovation Capital Fund. We're shortening the name to Lab to Launch. That allows us to fund startups from universities throughout the state of Michigan. Again, that last fund is subsidized by the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. So with all of that, I felt like we had kind of the basis for a program here to plug into what we already have. Next slide, please. So just at a very high level, I'll walk through our program here. But again, it's very similar to what CU Boulder has piloted. We using last year in our pilot cohort, a very small team, a lean team of only 4 of us, built this program from the ground up and worked with our licensing and mentors and residents to come up with a curated list of promising technologies and PIs, much in the same way that CU did or does. And once we came up with that marketed list, we marketed that list to entrepreneurs to apply to the program and rank their favorite technologies and tell us why they thought they'd be a good fit for those technologies. Our team of 4 then went through last cohort a selection process and matched the entrepreneurs with the technologies. I will advise that the 4 people are not enough to do that process, and so we'll talk more about that later. And then in the last cohort, we gave entrepreneurs and inventors really a 3-month sprint to work together to put together pitches that they would then pitch to our office to build a startup and then start negotiating a license. At the end of the program, the hope was that we'd have startups with license agreements to our intellectual property that then I could invest in using money from the Accelerate Blue funding. So we're guaranteeing for any of the startups that come out of the program a minimum level of investment, which is $50K, with the opportunity for them to pitch for additional funding, as they pitch to other investors in a larger round. Next slide, please. So last year's cohort, worked out very similarly to I think CU's first cohort. So the top of Michigan's funnel is quite large in terms of the number of inventions we see every year. This past fiscal year, we saw 673 invention reports. So we have a lot of technologies to pick from. Our licensing team narrowed down to about 80 of their favorites, and then worked with our mentors and residents to further narrow that down and then get agreement from the PIs that they really wanted to participate in this program, that they were willing to work with an entrepreneur and had the time to commit to the program. And simultaneously, we had a little bit more than 100 applicant entrepreneurs that, as I mentioned, we interviewed and matched one-to-one with about 25 technologies. So we only matched one entrepreneur with one technology. We didn't have a competition in the same way that I think CU has seen, and it just worked out that way. At the end of the day, we did have a showcase showcase event similar to what CU does. We had 11 pitches at that event, and then at the end of the program, we are launching, or we have launched 8 companies that, as I mentioned, are going license and that will secure a minimum of $50,000 of investment. Next slide, please. So just to give you an idea of some of the entrepreneurs and PIs who are involved in the program. So this is one of our startups that came out of the program, Anexa Bio. Ben is a Michigan MBA with an MD. He lives in Boston. He's also a venture investor. He matched up with Dushin Sun, who's associate dean in the College of Pharmacy, who's entrepreneurial and prolific in coming up with technology ideas, and for years has been asking for a way for us to find him entrepreneurs. So he was thrilled at this program, and I'm pleased to say that the Ben and Dushin formed a very fast friendship, and this technology, or this company, is currently outraising its first Series A of 10 million, and I believe they're in diligence with a number of funds. Next slide, please. Second startup to mention is General Orbit. So Parker is somebody who doesn't have an entrepreneurial background. He's was a chief operating officer of a packaging and logistics firm here in the Detroit area. And when I talked to him, it was very clear to me that it was somebody who could be an entrepreneur and did have the background and experience. Mark and Lauro on the PI side, don't have the entrepreneurial background and really did need somebody with operational background and expertise to take this technology forward. And so their technology is a satellite navigation system. So next slide, please. I'm pleased to say that they, again, launched the company in May, and about a month ago, won a pitch competition here in Michigan, where they received $375,000 in prize money, and they're well on their way to raising a $5 million round. So, these are real companies. These are real companies with people who, in a very fast amount of time have come together to form real startups. Next slide, please. So, I just want to quickly go through the next few slides here and talk about some of the things that we learned out of our first cohort. We did some customer discovery. Probably we did it backwards, and after we ran the program, then went back and talked to our licensing managers, our mentors, our inventors and entrepreneurs, and some of the things that we learned, that it's absolutely critical to strengthen the onboarding and expectation process up front on all sides, with all the stakeholders involved, so that everyone understands what this program is. We had entrepreneurs who thought they were coming to this program with their own startups, and even when we told them that's not how this works, you're coming to start a company based on our technologies, they still didn't understand it. It's important to engage mentorship early and consistently. Entrepreneurs asked for more focused training. Amy mentioned the social component that is critical for them. And they wanted more background materials sooner. So that's something that we're changing going forward. On the licensing team, they wanted to figure out ways of improving the technology vetting and marketing. So marketing the materials or the technologies to give entrepreneurs a better sense of TRL and the market potential of the technologies. And the licensing managers having the most familiarity with the technologies and the PIs wanted much more involvement with the interview process. So that's one change that we're making this year. And then the mentors and residents are very involved in the development of the core curriculum. And as Amy mentioned, we've got regular check-ins with go, no go gates. The last thing I'll say is, improving communications and setting expectations is definitely clear across the board. Next slide, please. Just very quickly, the other thing that we're changing is as Amy mentioned, we're lengthening the process from match to pitch day. Last year it was about 3 months. We found that that wasn't long enough for them to coalesce and really get through a lot of those go no gates. So right now we're wrapping up applications, and we're hoping to have matches by mid-December so that we can kick things off and go through the sprint to pitch day. These are just some of the ideas or examples of programming that we have. We're also going to have Ask Me Anything sessions with our team every month, as well as the regular check-ins. Next slide, please. So my recommendations to all of you who are thinking about doing a similar program is to leverage your existing programs and your ecosystem. If you don't have all of these things at your disposal in your office, find others in your ecosystem who can, pitch in and, be a part of this program. I have found that there are plenty of people in our ecosystem who have come to us asking how they can be a part of the process. And so I would recommend doing that as well. Second thing is to say that a small bit of funding helps. We don't pay the entrepreneurs a stipend in the same way that CU does. So although I think that a small bit of funding helps, it's more of a hook, and I think it's probably secondary. The entrepreneurs are coming to this program because they want to find their next gig. And the marketing and opportunity to participate in this cohort with mentorship is really what they find attractive. Third thing is that marketing to entrepreneurs is tough. If somebody has an idea of where entrepreneurs hang out, please let me know. We've had to use a variety of marketing channels similar to CU. So their idea of using influencers is something that we've stolen from them yet again. And then the last two things, are just to say, communicate and over communicate, and that goes for internally to make sure that everyone understands the expectations of the program, of the process, and the objectives. And lastly, I would say just try something. We have seen great success with our program. At the same time, we're going to have to adapt. And we're learning, and I think it's only going to get better over time. Next slide, please. And that's where I'll leave it. So if you want to learn more about our program and explore the technology blurbs, you can go to our websites there. And if you know anyone who'd like to apply, the deadline was supposed to be tomorrow, but we're extending it through the weekend. So applications will be due for entrepreneurs on Sunday.
Great. Well, glad it's still open. So in case there's some people watching this webinar, they can potentially apply. And actually, that brings up a good question is, both of you have more entrepreneurs than you can match to your particular technologies. How do you continue to engage those who don't get matched and communicate? And how do you communicate with them initially that they don't match, and then hopefully keep them engaged because they just may not match right now because their domain expertise doesn't match something that you have? So Amy, I'll ask you that question first and then go to Dave.
Yeah, sure. So this year we had about 160 applicants. We led about 70 of those into the interview process. And my guess is we'll be down to about 15 teams or so that are in the cohort. So, so certainly there's a substantial down selection process that happens. Some folks weed themselves out, so to speak, where if they don't find a perfect match, they then like leave the program. Oftentimes they'll reach out to us in the Embark leadership team and say, like, I didn't find a match, do you have anything in this specific area or something like that? And we can help facilitate that. They just wouldn't necessarily be eligible to be a part of the Embark cohort, but they would still have access to all of our resources and our startup agreements and all of those things. We have had applicants reapply to Embark if they didn't find a fit in one cohort. They then come back in future cohorts, and we've had some of those that find a match or find something that's promising. I think there was a second part of your question, Kirsten, and I forgot what that was.
It was and I already
keeping them engaged after.
Keeping them engaged, yes.
Yeah. So that's something that we're still playing with a little bit. We've had more applicants pitch an idea than we have had room for in the cohort. So some of them we will still offer them the exclusive IP access, even if we can't provide them a spot in the cohort. We haven't had a ton of folks move forward in that way. So we've tried to kind of reframe how we set up the program. So we'll see how that works out for us for this year. But we are certainly looking across the cohort to see who we'd want to engage with a different startup, if there's a way to do that, and who is a good fit for like a mentor type role or something as a way to keep them in the ecosystem and keep them engaged.
Yeah, and I guess I'd say all of that, applies similarly with us. A couple more things to add is, that we are building, kind of a database, if you will, of entrepreneurs that we can go back to. But then the other piece of it is, having CU running a similar program allows us to say, well, you didn't match here. Why don't you go to, the Embark program and apply there? And so having more universities do this, creates that network effect that we can leverage off of each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dave was one of our like influencers we reached out to in our recruitment stage. We share with folks when they're recruiting for their program and vice versa. So others who run similar programs, we think about that way as well.
Well, there was a question from someone about if your programs are available to other universities. I think your programs are particular to your institutions, but you're very excited about other institutions adopting these models and potentially being able to share resources and practices, et cetera. Right? Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the more of us that across tech transfer that do programs like this, the higher quality folks are going to attract, right? Because it's going to be on more entrepreneurs' radar, on more, we're gonna kind of increase the quality of the entrepreneurs, the startups that come out of it. I think it's a real win-win across the ecosystem.
Okay, great. So we had some other questions about the matching process itself. And so I just want to make sure we have that clear about how the matching process works. And so I'm going to explain how I understood it. But and the matching process is between both groups. So the entrepreneur themselves and then the inventor group that they would like to make, that they are comfortable with this particular match. Is that correct for both of you?
Yeah, I would say that that's correct. The entrepreneur is picking technologies, gets matched up with the technology, ultimately gets interviewed by our team, and then the inventors or PIs, have kind of right of first refusal. Ultimately, though, it's still a dating process like that. The program itself is that kind of dating process to see, can we actually form a team?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, we look at it as like venture partners has the final decision-making authority, but part of getting in like getting the inventors on board is they want to know that they have kind of like a veto power if they're like, I do not like this person, like I do not want to work with them. That I will say that has not happened for us, but we do tell them that they have input. What we've seen more often, and what we'll specifically go to the research teams to understand, is we have multiple teams in the semifinals pitching a given technology. We want to know if the research team has a preference. It has happened that where they do have a strong preference, and it has also happened where like, please let the process play out. Like I have no idea. I've never done this before. So there's both sides, but we always want to take their input into account and make them feel, like they're a part of the process.
Again, though, expectation setting is upfront is important to find PAs who do have an open mind. You
Yeah.
know, this may not be the perfect candidate on paper, but they actually might be a great, co-founder for your technology. Please keep an open mind.
That's good. And the coaching there too. Yeah. So the next question, have either of you been able to work with your alumni associations at your respective institutions to try and recruit entrepreneurs? Dave, do you want to take that one first?
Um, so yes and no. I mean, we've reached out to them
Mm.
to get the word out, so have it marketed, and that they've done that. But as far as actually, kind of reaching out to individuals beyond just the sort of marketing component, no, we haven't figured that out.
Okay. Amy, have you?
Yeah, agreed. We include them in our as an influencer. I'll just keep coming back to that, I guess. We include them as an influencer. We have had alums that have applied that have gone through, been members of the cohort. Um, I don't think that they've gotten there through like a specific recruitment effort. It's probably more just we're on their radar to find things. But this is the first year we've done that influencer outreach. So once we have the cohort whittled down a little bit more, we'll know.
Okay. And could you define it? There are some people on the webinar who don't know exactly what you mean by influencer. Could you define that for them?
Oh, yes. So we looked in our networks, like our personal networks, our, network in the ecosystem, and thought like who has networks that would be good to recruit entrepreneurs from. So we worked with our local accelerators. We reached out to some of the other university partners, folks that we knew had networks of folks that we thought might be willing to share about Embark on their LinkedIn page, or, reach out to a few key folks in their network individually. And that was part of our recruitment toolbox for this year's cohort.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll say, I think some of our best applicants have come through kind of that word of mouth, hearing about the program from, somebody in our network who's an influencer who said, you should apply, you'd be great for this program. So
Yeah.
that's worked well for us.
Awesome. That's great. Industry breakdown. What does the industry breakdown look like for the technologies that have gone through your programs? Dave, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I would say like that it's probably a bit more than half, or maybe 60% on the life sciences side. We had a number of therapeutic or a couple of therapeutics out of in the eight startups, some med tech and digital health. And then with the remaining third or 40%. It's across the board of physical science. Actually, we had two in the space or space technology. So it's a bit of everything for us.
Yeah,
Amy?
I would say the same. I think as we go through our technology portfolio at CU is largely patentable IP. We have some copyrights, but that is, I guess, a minority in terms of what our portfolio looks like. So that's what we're pulling from as we're looking to round out the technologies that go into the cohort. And I think there's been a pretty decent split. We've had some bioscience and med device. We've also had a lot in the physical sciences space. So it's really spanned the gamut for us.
Let's talk about staff. So Dave, you mentioned you have 4 people working on this. Amy, how many people at CU are working on this? And, I know this is not probably your full-time jobs. You've got other aspects that you're working on as well.
Yes. So we have 2 of us. So the head of our licensing group, which is our senior director, Marta Zagagic, she and I co-lead the Embark program. We've had a part-time program manager that helps with each cohort. And then we have an EIR that we bring on, an entrepreneur in residence or mentor in residence, you can call it whatever you want, to help advise the team. But I will say, like, Embark is very much like a venture partners wide effort. So, we're leading the program manager is handling a lot of the correspondence and kind of day-to-day specific operations. But it requires our licensing team to pull together a lot of the information on the technologies and those details and help with the group calls and facilitate those. I mean, they're the ones that have the deep relationship with the researchers and their portfolio. So they're a trusted advisor to be on those calls with them. It requires our I-Core team, because a lot of these teams are going to go through I-Core. It requires our accelerator, folks to be on board, because they're going to work with them, if they do our Ascent Deep Tech Accelerator. So it's really, a big effort across our whole team.
I will also say that, yeah, it was 4 of us in our pilot cohort, and we have broadened it to a much wider group of individuals. So there are 12 people who are involved sort of in different subcommittees this year, which has made a huge difference. Not just in terms of spreading, kind of dividing the labor, but also, having a variety of voices from licensing, marketing, ventures, and has really kind of helped make the program that much better. So, as Amy said, it's an office-wide endeavor.
We have a couple of questions on the criteria of the CEOs or the entrepreneurs that you're bringing in, potentially these co-founders. So could you talk about what it is that you're looking for, that criteria, and like other top, like, 3 characteristics that you're looking for when you're potentially doing these matches? And Dave, I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah. So again, back to keeping an open mind, that was, sort of the philosophy going into this, this program, and saying, well, we'll know it when we see it, or we'll know when we see one. That said, I think it's important for the entrepreneurs to be able to speak the language, of the PI. So having a technical background is certainly strongly preferred. They don't need to be an entrepreneur with, 3 exits, successful exits. It can be somebody like Parker Boundy who, comes from a technical background and, has operator experience, and is willing to roll up their sleeves. Those are kinds of the things that we're looking for. Everyone, is a first-time entrepreneur once. And so that's where, we're willing to accept people who, are coachable and kind of fit the bill.
Amy, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, having that drive, right? There's that spark of an entrepreneur, whether you've done it before or not, you've got to have that real startup drive. That's very hard to assess and figure out. I will say with our first 2 cohorts, we were very liberal with who got into the program. A lot of folks who applied, if we thought they had any chance, got into the program. With our 3rd cohort, we were trying to be a little more discerning in terms of who got into the next steps. as part of our, internal workload management in terms of how we, how many folks are joining some of those calls with the PIs. We need to be cognizant of what they're going through and the time constraints they have. So we're looking to limit down the cohort a bit more. So so what we did was we added a quick pitch video to the application, and that helped us to kind of see a little bit more about who these people are and things like that. So we chose 4 random technologies that were not in the cohort. They had a couple bioscience technologies, a couple physical science technologies, and asked them to submit a 1 to 2 minute pitch video. And that was a significant part of how we selected or down selected the candidates, reducing the pool by about half instead of what we had done before, just maybe like 80% or so got in. And as I mentioned, the resumes, cover letters like of these folks were super impressive. And so I think there's a level up in terms of how discerning we were, in part because that was what the cohort dictated was, we had some of these really top folks coming in, and so we had that ability to do that. And then through the down select process, the ultimate, we are evaluating these candidates throughout. So we reach out to our licensing team who's like on all those group calls to understand, who are they seeing that they're really impressed by, who are the inventor teams impressed by, as they're going through. So we take that into account, and then ultimately they pitch to get the funding in whatever form that looks like. So it's evaluating their kind of overall performance, but ultimately it's the pitch that gets them over that final piece.
This is a quick question. I've got 4 more questions. This is a quick one. Is it only faculty to participate in your programs, or do postdocs and grad students interested in startups also participate to potentially find their co-founder? Yes or no?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Let's think about it.
Okay. I love that. I'm going to read this full one just because I love it. Do you believe the competitive aspect helped engage entrepreneurs and resulted in more committed entrepreneurs? Would you typically have 100+ founders at a time interested in commercializing technology out of your institution without the competition? And the person says, I love this idea and your results. So do you think the competitive aspect really helped?
I think I'm not sure about that. I think making this into a program really helped. We had tried a number of, to Dave's point before, like we had also tried a few different ways to do this. We tried to kind of do these like one-on-one matches, and really struggled to find the right person at the right time for the right technology, like making that magic happen. Like it has happened for us, but it's very rare and very hard. We are now starting to think about Embark as one of our biggest outreach events of the year, where we are bringing a lot of new people into our fold and into our ecosystem, making them more of who we are and what we're doing. There aren't a lot of times where we're getting 160, most of them brand new to our ecosystem, to us, and we're throwing public facing events. We might get over 200 people to be there, but a lot of them are aware of CU, or they're in our local community, or they're somehow like they're already mentoring for us or something like that. So this is really creating this program, putting the job application out there, sharing it as broadly as we can, has turned this into a real magnet. And it gets back to, I think it might have been the first question you asked, of like, how do we keep these people in the ecosystem? And that's why one of the reasons why we're really starting to focus on that with this cohort is like, we really need to do something. This is such a great opportunity. So if it's the competitive aspect, I don't know, entrepreneurs are competitive. So I definitely see where the asker is getting that from. But I'm not sure if that's like the thing or just a component of it.
Dave, do you want to answer as well?
Yeah, I would agree. I'm not sure that is what attracts them. I think as Amy suggested, it is the fact that it's programmatizing we're repackaging kind of what we already do.
Yeah.
And I think the other, the other piece of it is that like by marketing the technologies and by pre-vetting them, it gives the entrepreneurs, a sense as to where to look, and B, some comfort that somebody has pre-screened these technologies and these are the best ones that the University of Michigan has to offer. So, they don't have to ask, is there an IP filing? Is there anything here? It's kind of the best that we're bringing to the table.
Well, we have a ton of questions left, but we are at our time, or even our extra time at this point for the webinar. So what I'm going to suggest is, one, we follow up with you and get some written responses to a bunch of these questions. And then second, I think we should do another webinar about 2 years. And because I know that these programs still are relatively new, and see what's happening. Because one of the questions is about metrics and what it is that you're looking at for metrics. And I think that there will be really interesting responses, but we just don't have the time to go through fully that right now. But we will work with both of you potentially to get more of these questions answered. Obviously, with all the questions that came in, with all the people who are on this, there is a huge amount of interest in what it is that what you guys are doing at Colorado and Michigan. So I am hopeful that if we do a repeat webinar this in 2 years, we'll have a lot more folks as panelists on the webinar as well doing this as well. So I want to thank you both so much for taking the time to talk about these programs. There's obviously a ton of work that has gone into developing these programs with every eye of making these a success, and getting more startups off the ground and therefore more innovations making impact. So thank you both so much for what you're doing. Thank you for sharing your experiences with us. Thank you to the audience for spending so much time with us today. And please do fill out that survey form that we have afterwards. We're actually deciding our webinars for next year right now. So your responses help us decide, what programs we're going to put on like this. So again, Amy and Dave, thank you so much for sharing your experiences today, and we'll be following up soon.